My name is Marc Caron, and today I'm really excited with the guests that we have joining us today because we're going to talk about the importance of social connectedness and group work with psychedelics. And we have today with us Dana Harvey and Peg Peters of the Gathering Groups. And that's what they do. They work with bringing people together in groups, working with psychedelics, and creating change and transformation. Because the Gathering Groups really believes in human connection is the opposite of not just addiction, but of what so many of the mental health issues in our world today. And they've got tons of research and experience and a great program that instead of me talking about it directly, we're going to dive right in and speak to Peg and Dana. And I want to start really, Peg, first off, welcome to the program. It's great to have you both here. And tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you got into this line of work, and we'll really take it from there.
Well, thanks for having us, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. Dana and I are really lucky to be here and to be able to talk about this work that we're doing. I guess, I'll dive right in. And, so I grew up in BC in the Lower Mainland, and I became an ordained minister pretty early on in my 20s with a heart to connect people to the divine, and that was really my heart. I had a number of things that happened in my life, in my young life. My wife and I lost a baby, and in the midst of that grief, I really found that the community that we were part of really didn't know how to hold pain. They just had kind of Bible verses for me. And here I was a minister trying to minister to other people. And now here I am broken and really feeling the loss as a young couple. And it actually caused me to begin to pull away from the church. Even though I had done all this work to become a minister, I just felt like this wasn't really what I wanted, and I began to pull away from this vision of a God that would punish people, that would take your baby from you because you weren't living right or anything like that. And I just said, no, that's not the kind of God I want to be around. That's not what I believe in. And so I left. Pursued other things, became a professor of world religions and some other things, and got into other kind of work. But it wasn't really until about 2017, I read an article in Time magazine called "The God Molecule," and I was like, "What is this?" And so I read it, and it was it was just early conversations around what was happening at Johns Hopkins University and some of their early clinical trials in just before so they started 2000, I think, is when they started some of this research coming out about 10, 15 years later. I was fascinated that a molecule that you could consume could give you a mystical experience. I'd been longing to I have a personal connection with the divine, unmediated, right? Not through a priest, not through whatever, but direct. And I'd never felt that. My entire life, I'd never felt it. And so I got really curious, and I started researching and reading and looking. And one of my best friends was a marriage and family therapist. His name's Dave Phillips. And him and I began this to really dig into the literature, and we started looking at these early studies, and they were saying that people that had high dose psilocybin experiences, that had a mystical encounter, doesn't matter what religion they were from or non-religious or whatever, if they had some kind of this called a non-dual experience where they are they and the universe are one, that had a direct correlation to the diminishment of things like anxiety, for depression, diminishment of end-of-life anxiety. They were dealing with cancer patients that were at the end of their life, dying of cancer, and nothing was treating these people. They would wake up in night terrors. They'd wake up just terrified of dying, and nothing could treat this. And so they tried this. What if we give them, 3 sessions with a therapist, give them a high dose psilocybin experience, and then kind of do some integration? And the research was showing that in one session, this is an ongoing treatment, one session, they had a new understanding of themselves, death, the divine, the importance of the present moment, to live each moment as if it's your last. And this idea of the fear of cancer would disappear in 85% of these people. I couldn't believe this. And so I was like, I want to explore this for myself. And so I was able to connect in with some therapists in Vancouver and had my first experience about 7-8 years ago. And that first experience, Mark, it radically changed my life. And I would, I get emotional talking about it because it's so transformative for me. It was how I thought about myself, my family. I have 4 growing daughters. My relationships with my daughters I began to get a different perspective on that. My marriage. I have ADHD, which I really struggled with as an adult. This gave me a sense of calm and peace in my mind. I would never been able to pray or meditate for a minute. I couldn't be quiet. All of a sudden, this was accessible to me after this session. And the downline of this, I mean, I could talk about this for hours because it was so transformative for me. But after that first experience, I kind of came out of that 5 hours later, and my mouth was like on the ground. And I said, what is this? This could help our planet. This could heal people. And I felt like I had finally come home. I had a profound mystical experience, encountered a feminine divine. I had only understood the divine in masculine terms my entire life. Christianity and the patriarchy had funneled that vision of God in a very narrow box, and that got blown wide open. And so that began my journey into say, what's my life going to look like? Because this is what I need to be doing. I'd been longing to pastor people and help them connect, and I realized that this was going to be the new way that I was going to encounter people, was through plant medicine. And so that's kind of that's how it started for me. And I really looked at models of how do we integrate this material? Anyone can take a high dose psychedelic and have a wow experience, but it was how do we actually root this into people's lives? How do we help people have marriages that are more meaningful? How do we help them have more engagement with their children? How do we create, experiences where we feel connected with the universe, right? And so I realized that it's not just about the substance. The plant medicine itself is profound, but it comes to us in a container. And the way that I'd seen it being done in indigenous circles around the planet, and when my history in religious, as a religious studies professor, I began to make all sorts of connections that I wasn't able to make before. That trance state, that altered state work with drumming, with, whether it's medicine circles, with not just with plants, but with all sorts of other mechanisms, sound, drumming, dancing, all of these were doing the same thing, but they were all done in community. And what I was realized that was happening in the psychedelic world, early on, I could see it, was that there was a very Western medical model behind it. Now I understand that it's all around the research. You want to control the substance, you want to control the outcomes. But I realized that that's not how the healing was going to take place in a community, that these medicines had to come in a container of a tribe or a family or a structure. And so I began to look around for models like that, and I found one on Vancouver Island, and really looked at Vancouver Island University and the Roots to Thrive team were developing a model using ketamine. And I went and trained with them and saw this is going to be the template that we could begin to tweak with so that we could help people get into a group. They could work together to really have this trauma-informed model where they can feel safe and connected with one another for 8 to 10 weeks together online. Then they come together for an in-person medicine experience, and then they go back online and they integrate that for the next 4 weeks. And that 12-week model, we began to workshop it and try it, and it was unbelievable, the results we were getting. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And what really spurred me along, and then to find this model. And now my wife and I started this organization called Gathering Groups, with really the goal to say, how do we take this model and scale it and really give it to people in different communities so they can use this in a safe, responsible way in community. So that's kind of how I got into it, Mark.
Beautiful. I love so much about what you shared already, and I look forward to unpacking it some more. And one of the things that really strikes me, and I love your background in religion or theology, however we want to call that, because you said a few things there that we'll talk about later. But I want to, hand it over to Dana. Dana, you've been on the program a couple of times now. So again, if people are just tuning in the first time, tell people a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, I've been on the show a couple times in a couple different capacities, which just kind of shows you that that my life in psychedelics has been weaving its way. I actually started I had my own transformational experiences with psychedelics. I understood the power of intentional psychedelic use. So I was really, really excited when psychedelics kind of collided with my career route, which was in communications, global communications for new industries and emerging technologies. So by virtue of that, it made sense that I was recruited into this new industry of psychedelics as CCO and head of investor relations for one of the publicly traded companies. And I found that super exciting to be able to marry my own transformations and understanding of the power with the research, the history, the politics, the trials, like everything else, and to be instrumental in helping to educate the public and help to destigmatize. I happened to be working with a couple of therapists and had a particularly profound supported psychedelic experience where it became really, really clear to me that it was time to move on from what I was doing. The message was it was trying to get out of my head and more into my heart. And basically came out of that experience with 3 pillars that I wanted to bring into the world of psychedelics. Basically, the mushroom said to me, we've got you in the right place, just not quite doing the right thing. So I came out with a mission to provide loving guidance, to share evidence-based knowledge, and to build or cultivate supportive communities. So from there, I resigned from my position. I dove deep into training and educating myself on microdosing, on trip sitting, on the different modalities that go along with supporting people with psychedelic use, and had the opportunity to apprentice with a psychedelic therapist and get some hands-on experience as well. And basically got to a point where I was able to support people who were choosing already to use psychedelics, to offer them harm reduction and safety and the opportunity for transformation. That was the work that I was doing for a while. I was simultaneously building a community, as that was one of my instructions, and that community lives on Clubhouse under the Flourish Academy, where we provide free education every week to people around psychedelics, spirituality, masculinity, femininity, and the intersection. I then started another organization called Sisters in Psychedelics, and this was kind of in response to looking around at this psychedelics as it was emerging as an industry and seeing a real imbalance in all areas as far as male and females, and just seeing this opportunity, like this is such a divinely feminine space. Why are we not being more elevated? The women, the divine feminine, we are the original medicine keepers. And so I really had a passion for building and supporting a community, supporting women in the field. And I've been doing that. And I guess in my those are like my showing my passion for community. And then in my own work, particularly with guiding people through microdosing, I do one-on-one coaching around microdosing, but I also lead groups through microdosing. And what I was finding was, without even understanding the research and the science that gathering has behind it, was that people's transformations were enhanced and accelerated when they were in community. And I was really, really curious about, why is this? And then I had this unique opportunity to join one of Gathering Group's programs. And my heart just went on fire for what Gathering is offering. I've obviously, since I've kind of gone the expanse of the psychedelic route, from the above ground, the legalization, the medicalization route, the underground route, the medicine women, like seen all sides. And what I saw in Gathering was quite simply the best of all angles. They bring in a very evidence-based, scientifically informed approach. They also bring in indigenous leadership, indigenous ways of knowing, and indigenous ways of being. They bring together the community, where I found that so much transformation is enhanced. And they're really bringing accessibility to this medicine through the program that they've developed, that also has the option to have some coverage from major insurance companies. So like accessibility, indigenous leadership, ways of knowing, scientifically based, and community. It's just like, wow, my heart is with gathering groups and I want to be involved. And so I got to evolve with them to the point of becoming one of their facilitators. And then from there, just with Peg's and mine ongoing conversations, eventually became part of their leadership team.
Beautiful, and congratulations on that. The gathering groups and their people are lucky to have you on the team.
Oh, we are so lucky to have her. Like it's like a windfall to have Dana part of our team. And yeah, and so Dana, thank you so much for those, just the way you framed that. Looking at when I kind of think about psychedelics, there's kind of like traditionally there's been two models, right? There's been more of the Western kind of two therapists, the MAPS model, right? Two therapists, one individual, 3 sessions, you do the dosing, then you do 3 sessions of follow-up, and then you're kind of done. And I understand why they do that for research, but that it still is locked into an individualized model of healing. And it says that there's something kind of wrong with me and I've got to get fixed by myself, right? And then there's this other model, we'll call it like the ceremony model, and it has its beauty in it too. Let's do an ayahuasca retreat. We'll go to Peru. I don't know these people, but I sit in a group, I do the ayahuasca, and then I fly home and I have to integrate, somehow, but I don't know the people. Now, this is kind of a hybrid, because what you're doing is you're building, you meet a group of strangers online, 8 people, but you develop over the course of 10 weeks a shared language, a shared way of being together online. It's 90 minutes once a week. You get a question ahead of time that allows you to go into a vulnerable space. It's timed, so it's very trauma informed. And that's a very important thing, because safety is our ultimate value at gathering, is that unless people feel safe, they can't open up and go into those deep places to do
well, and that's something that I think, Peg, is super important to understand, is that, we always talk about set and setting and creating this safe, sacred space. I'm more personally a fan of, ceremonial type work, in group work of that way, for that reason. And there's something about when people have the opportunity to share, when they feel safe, and what comes up. I've sat in many ceremonies, many circles, and when people have that opportunity to be seen and to be heard without judgment, with an understanding of each other and maybe the human condition or their condition, again, without judgment or blame or shame, it changes everything.
Changes everything.
And I think the power of community, what happens, and this is just my belief, is it creates a oneness where people realize that as different as they are, maybe culturally or genetically, experientially, whatever that is, that there's a commonality, that we are all the same. Because when you start talking to people and you get right down to the root of things, we have the same problems, we have the same needs, we have the same desires. And when that's not being met, and we can't talk about it, heaven forbid, because it's wrong, because of some rule somewhere that someone imposed on us, it's that bottle, like you were talking about cancer earlier, and dis-ease is disease, right? When you are not at ease, when you are not flowing and happy and joyful and biochemically producing those endorphins and hormones and everything else that actually allows you to heal, the opposite happens. Well, all of a sudden we're stressed, we're freaked out, and we contain everything, and we all just shove it down there, and we don't allow it to come out.
Yeah.
right? And we never talk about it.
Mm.
And that's why I think what you guys are doing with the gathering groups and creating that community, which also I would say creates friendships for life with these people.
Yeah, I know. That's what's so interesting, Mark, is like you talk about we're actually all one. You know, I just have one of my daughters is in a group right now, and she's going through it, and her group is really fascinating. You know, so she's 23, and she says there's a gentleman in her group who's 85, and there's another guy who's 74. There's a woman who's in her 60s, and she said I would have never talked to these people. What would I have in common with an 85-year-old man? I'm 23. And yet every week we get together with we don't talk about our jobs. They don't know what I do. They don't know, because that's not the focus. The focus is my heart, what's going on inside of me. And the group is here to witness it and to hold those emotions with you. And she says, I can't wait to get online and meet, the 85-year-old guy who every week gives me this compassion. So now they've never met in person yet. They're going to come up to their retreat in 2 weeks. She goes, I cannot wait to meet this diverse group of people that I would have never had any connection with, because I would have stayed with my little group of friends that are in their 20s, But this shows us that we all actually have way more in common than we have difference. Because when we strip away all of the things, all the doing, right, all of our jobs and all, it's really our heart. We're just these kind of little kids inside that want to belong, right? We want to be in a little fort together.
Yeah, and that being said, the kid inside, when was the last time, as adults, we, laughed a lot and celebrated our own life. We get so busy being busy and doing. We're human beings, not human doings. And we have to be in order to be effective.
Yeah, just imagine as well, like you were talking about community, by the time you're talking about ceremony in community, by the time these people come together and meet each other face to face for their ceremony, they have already met weekly for 8 weeks and vulnerably shared these topics of their heart, so that when they come into that ceremony space, they're not just getting to know each other. They are already so bonded. And as Peg said, that gives them such a sense of safety. So, we always talk about like surrender and just like let it happen. It can be very hard to do if you're in a room full of strangers. But these people are so intimately connected by the time they come together that it allows them the opportunity to just really relax and be and allow the experience to happen.
Yeah, and you nailed it there, because it's just true. So many people don't speak their truth because they're afraid of the repercussion or the lashback, and that's not necessarily just in a setting like this, but in life. You can't speak your truth to your parents because that's wrong, or to your boss, or to the church, or to the government, because there's that element of control. And when you have this opening, and I remember sitting in ceremony one time, and this one gentleman, he was 72, I think, and he started sharing at the end. And he says, I've never shared this with anyone, but he felt comfortable and safe, and shared something that happened 65 plus years ago that changed his life forever, that he never once spoke about. And to see that weight lifted off of him when he was actually felt safe to speak it out loud with non-judgment. In my coaching modality and thing that we learn, the first thing we do is we seek to understand and appreciate the other person's world. No judgment, because you will never influence or be able to create change or have any of that ability if you're judging people. And when people start judging people, it's about power and control and being right or being better, right? It's a very ego-driven thing. And when you talk about this beauty of, I love the fact that people are connected together for these 8 weeks, and like you say, building those relationships, so when they go into this experience, it's that much more magnified because of the level of safety and trust, versus just going into a one-nighter or two-nighter, like you were saying, Peg, and not knowing these people and not having the support. So let's talk about, because one thing that's really I love about what you've created is I might backtrack a little bit here, because you talk about accessibility.
Mm.
And if we're going to change the world, we need to be able to have something that is accessible to the masses, not to the classes. I remember years ago, somebody says, oh, well, in business, you either serve the masses or you serve the classes, but we have to serve everybody. Yeah. And we have to find these sustainable models, because as my friends, Tom and Eden down in Portland, Tom Hatsis, if you're familiar with him, does a lot of work in speaking in psychedelics, but they came up with their conference is the Pay What You Can-ference, which I love, because non-accessible is not acceptable. Mm-hmm. And what you guys have done is quite pioneering in the sense of the medical coverage that some people are able to get for this to be accessible to them. So maybe you can expand more on that, because I think it's really pioneering in this work.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we're trying to do with a hybrid model is we are trying to attract like therapists, physicians, nurses into this as facilitators, but we're not excluding other people that have gifts and passions in that as well. And so we think there's a hybrid here. And so with people with, official designations like a RCC therapist, for instance, they can run a group program online and say, hey, I'm one of the facilitators. I'm running a group program. Here's the content. Here's the 12-week protocols. Here's all the topics we discuss. It's in essence group therapy. Even though it's not therapy, it can be classified as kind of a group therapy model. And so people what we do, and we've been working with a couple of different providers, is we've been helping their people submit the 12-week protocol, and then we just take the day, which is the retreat. We don't submit that day. So, because that's the medicine day, and the insurance companies don't want anything to do with that. But all the prep and the integration sessions, there's no medicine there. So that's really the bulk of the work, right? Because we're prepping people so much and then integrating it. So what it allows them to do is submit to their insurance provider, really the program, and get about 80 to 85% coverage, and they're getting it. And so we're finding that this is a way that, people are getting some help. It's accessible right now, it's $2,100 a person. Right now for the 12 weeks, it's about 28 hours of facilitated content that you get from that. So it's really, it's cheaper than one-on-one therapy. Most therapists are around $150 minimum now. So you're getting high quality facilitated group work and a medicine retreat day for really, in a way that's, you can do it in a monthly plan. You can submit to your provider. We have all these kind of options that we want to get people to be able to try. And, there's no reason why this shouldn't be accessible in every city across Canada eventually in the next year. We are starting groups. We've done starting groups in Toronto and Kingston. We've got facilitators now being trained in Winnipeg and Calgary. So the goal is to see this as kind of as a movement, letting people get access to trained facilitators in this model. We have a very rigorous intake process that we go through a therapist and a nurse. And so, making sure that not everyone's ready for a group process, not everyone's ready for a medicine experience. And so we want to make sure that the people coming into the program are screened well and they understand really what they're getting into, because it's intense. Yeah. Oh, you're, Mark, I can't.
Yeah. See, just like we said, is this thing on? 2 different buttons for my mics. But what you were saying there in regards to, not everybody's ready. And psychedelics are not for everyone either, right? Yeah. Even if you think you're ready, because so many people, they get so fixated on this is it, but it might not be right for them. And the amounts, and Jamie Wheel had a great talk about a couple of years ago about that. How often, how much, what medicine, and so it's important for that people do their due diligence and talk to the right people, especially if you don't have any experience with these kinds of substances.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get nervous about the idea of a group. They think, oh no, I only feel comfortable being with a therapist. My healing is very private, and so a lot of people are nervous coming in. But as we do these interviews, we've done at least 25 groups now, and as we've kind of done post interviews, like what are people saying? What they're saying is that I was really nervous coming in because it's a group. I thought I have to share everything and everyone would know everything about me. That's not at all what happens, right? You have a timed amount. You're talking about your emotions, not necessarily the details of your life. You're talking about what the emotions are that are coming up and how you can sit with that. What people are saying to us is that I didn't know that what I really needed wasn't plant medicine. What I needed was connection. And the connection is what healed me. So when we do our, do our reviews back, I'd say maybe 2% of people talk about the retreat. Everyone talks about the connection. These are the people that I want to know the rest of my life. We're still meeting. We have lots of people still keep meeting as a group. After the group is over and the facilitators leave, they have the tools to stay meeting online once a month. And so they go, hey, let's do another retreat in a year. And then they book it with us and they do. So there's a model here that can be sustainable for people because you're attaching not to a therapist who you have to pay a lot of money to, you're attaching to other people. And you're attaching to a group. And so there's not an attachment ripping that happens. There's a bonding that stays together even when the group is over. And to me, that's really, really important. And it allows people to realize how powerful connection is. That's the antidote to what we need right now in our world.
Yeah. Something you want to add to that, Dana? Because I know there's something I do, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I just, what it's speaking for me is what you talked about right at the beginning, Peg, of your daughter, young 23-year-old woman and the 85-year-old man. And what I'm finding in the groups that I facilitate too is just that the sense of belonging. It comes from realizing we're all the same. And people are just astounded at the shares that happen and just realize that they're not alone and they're not weird and they're not crazy, and just gives them such a sense of belonging in the whole world to belong in this group.
Yeah. And I think, you nailed it again, Peg, just by sharing that what people are getting the most out of is the community and the connection. And we've talked about it, like you said, Dana, the oneness, the people realizing that. And I think it's so important because our society is so fractured now more than it ever has been. Yes. We've got these cities with millions of people in it, yet they don't talk to themselves or talk to each other. They don't talk to their neighbors. They don't get to know people. And if we look throughout history, communities is how people survived. And if we look at the indigenous cultures, they all had their role. They all played their part. They didn't have mental illness or all these kind of problems and challenges that are plaguing the Western world and our society today, because they all supported each other. There was community. There was something that was bigger than just the individual. But for whatever reason, we're so driven, ego and status and whatever that is, to achieve and do versus be. Yeah. And how can you be totally in love with yourself and life with as little as possible? We're mass consumers. We're destroying the planet. All for what? For what we think makes us feel good. Yet if that were the case, wouldn't we be living in joy and bliss all the time? Right. No, we have more mental illness. We have more addiction. We've got more disease, right? That if people ate clean food, got together and didn't work their ass off trying to achieve and succeed, get stuck in this rat race for, most of them don't even know why they're doing it, but to pay the bills and to get stuff, and they're not connected with all that is.
Mark, when you talk about like our culture, and what's happening in our culture, right, with this fragmentation, For 15 years, I started a nonprofit called Run for Water, and it was a charity that raised money using running races for clean water projects in Ethiopia. I had grown up in Ethiopia, and so I had a heart for that country. And so we started this nonprofit and we grew it, and we were able to raise millions of dollars for access to clean water. But I would go to Ethiopia and work with indigenous communities in Ethiopia that were needy. They didn't have water. They had, they were giving birth. We were building clinics and hospitals and schools and giving people access to clean water. But what I learned over that 15 years was, as I sat around a fire in a rural community in Ethiopia, they didn't have water. They didn't have a hospital. They maybe had food insecurity, but what they did have was community. And they would sit in a circle every night. They would sing, they would dance, they would connect. They didn't have mental illness. They maybe not have access to clean water, but they did not have the kind of anxiety and isolation that our culture has. And so we think that we're so much better because we have access to so many things. Now, listen, I don't want to give birth or be able to not be able to have access to clean water. I love the advancements that our technology and our culture has provided, full stop. But let us not get to a place where we think that we've arrived because we have to work 70 hours a week, pay crazy rent in downtown Vancouver, and think our lives are actually thriving when we're not, because we don't have connection and community. And so to me, this renaissance of plant medicine is coming at an incredibly important time in human history. It's coming right now because it's calling us to get back to connect with ourselves, with each other, and the world and our planet. And if we want to have any hope of saving our planet, we've got to get back in touch with this form of connection. And plant medicine and this communal way of doing it is a way that is scalable, that can help people kind of experience that level of connection.
Yeah. And, my experience with plant medicine is it's a vehicle, it's a tool, it's a natural way that is part of, as far as I'm concerned, our birthright, because it grows naturally. The mushroom grows naturally, cannabis grows naturally, been around for years, ayahuasca, the combining of different things, because I've always believed nature is the best pharmacy. Right. And when we eat different foods and we do different things, God, well, she put these things here for a reason, right?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
It's different. It's like we were talking earlier about when Wade Davis said, coca is no more cocaine than a potato is vodka. It's when you strip all the goodness away from things. Even sugar is a drug, for crying out loud. It lights up the opiate receptors in the brain more than heroin and cocaine, right? Yet we're taking a plant and stripping it from all of its other attributes as well. Right. So it's not, you're not getting the spirit of the plant. You're just getting the isolated, molecule that makes the difference. And it makes me think, when you talk community, it reminds me of that. I remember the name of the guy, but I've heard the story a number of times and read the information of that rat park that he made about addiction.
Yep.
And we see addiction being a paramount problem, not just here in Vancouver in the downtown east side, but everywhere. Yeah. But when they were alone, when the rats were alone, they'd consume like crazy because they're trying to feel good and get whatever they're getting from it. But as soon as they had a community of fellow rats, they were much less inclined to partake.
Yeah, Bruce Alexander.
Yeah, because our needs are being met in a different way. Yeah. And, you started too by talking about, being able to silence that part of ourselves, or meditation. I had my biggest oneness awakening, 2007, never forget the day, but it was a meditation. It was a 30-minute meditation that changed my life. It was psychedelic, but there was no psychedelics involved. My body was clean. I was in a good space. I was in a good place with community and like-minded people. This guy brought on this 5,000-year-old meditation that was like, oh my God. And it was oneness. Yeah. Right. But the Western mind can't silence itself. When I talk to, my friends, family, and coaching, whatever that might be, when was the last time you meditated? Do you meditate? Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't quiet my mind. Well, now you need to do more of it. Right. And what you were saying, Peg, singing and dancing, We have to use the body and release these energies. It needs to be out there. It creates a whole biochemical response in the body, the singing and the movement. And we don't do that enough. It was a great example. We had a great day a few weeks ago, one of my friends, and we're dancing at the end. And one of the guys was just sitting there. He wouldn't move. He wouldn't. And I'm like, come on, man. So, right? Because he couldn't, and then this is where community, I think, helps, because when everybody's doing it, you don't feel like a white guy dancing.
Right. We've lost ritual, right, Mark? We've lost ritual in our culture. So the idea of singing together, the idea of dancing and singing and having festivals and working around the lunar calendar and working with plant medicines and that was part of our human history for 100,000 years. And it's only in this very recent time period that, Nixon has outlawed war on drugs, outlawed these substances. And we've had this 50 years of a gap of being able to access these medicines for healing, connection, and growth. And we're wondering how did we get so off? Well, our species co-evolved with these plants. And we've used them in ritual settings. And so now we need to get back to these ways. And we need to do this in ways that bring us back into connection with one another, with ourselves, and with the natural world, and with spirit, with something larger than us. And I love, just behind you, Spirit Plant Medicine is your conference. I love it that you are intentionally saying we are not bracketing out spirit. If you want to get into plant medicine work, you have to be open to spirit, whatever you want to source, whatever you want to call that. It's going to come up. And it's, I think, Roland Griffiths, the head researcher at Johns Hopkins, he's dying of cancer now. Here he is, been doing this amazing research. He was on Oprah last week. He's been on Tim Ferriss telling these stories. And in his final, line, he says, what I want to do is I want to endow a chair at Johns Hopkins for a new form of secular spirituality, one that's not based in dogma, one that's not based in whether I believe this or not believe this, but is engaged with a direct encounter with the divine. Now, he's an atheist. He was an atheist, right? And yet his engagement with this work is realized we can't heal without being open to spirit. Full stop. So
I completely agree. Completely. Dana, I think you had something you wanted to add, because I got something to share to add to that, but Dana, go ahead.
I think just what was coming up for me as we were talking about community and the history of community and how we've lost that history of community, bringing in the spirit plant medicine into that, this is how spirit plant medicine has always been embraced since the beginning of time, was in community, with support, with community. It's only in these recent years that it's become this individualized model, which reflects our individualized world. So bringing the spirit plant medicines back into community where they belong and experiencing them in such a way, I think is so powerful and critical.
Absolutely. And Peg, once again, you must be wielding a hammer, because you keep nailing it in my view, my friend. But, spirit has to be part of any full-on growth and transformation. You can grow so much, but until you embrace spirituality, and like you say, not religion, not dogma, nothing of that nature, because, well, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But spirit's a very different thing, and acknowledging the divine and our connection to nature. And Paul Stamets, he said it before when we talked, and I saw him doing another interview conversation just the other day online. And he says, we're doing this because of spirit, not because of money or anything of that nature. And if you're not bringing spirit into it, you're not doing it. You're just playing, I guess, right? And it leads me back to thinking about it. Who's a Buddhist monk, Buddhist teacher, did a talk with us years ago. And he says, the psychedelics aren't healing you. It's none of these medicines that are actually healing you. It's your consciousness. And when you expand your consciousness and you let the light in, the proverbial light, and you let that in, that's what's really doing the healing. These medicines, whether the psychedelic medicines and entheogens that we use, or whatever it is we're using, opens the door to expand our consciousness so that we can let more in, because we have to get past that part of ourselves. That's why some people can't meditate, because they can never get past that, because they're so stuck. It's so entrenched in them that something's got to happen bigger than themselves to get them out of their head, right? It's like I said to Dana earlier today, when you're in your head, you're dead. When you're in your heart, you're smart. So we have to drop into our heart, and
I
lead
love
with
that.
that, right?
And there's a desperation, like, man, not desperation, there's an urgency. That's, I would say, there's an urgency. The reason why plant medicine for me is like, this is what I think and breathe all the time now, is about how do we engage? How do we get this into communities, right? How do we get this, into, our spiritual communities too? And I think there's going to be a revolution in the next 10 years in all sorts of religious communities. We know that people are leaving traditional religious communities, particularly Christianity. It's on the down, that what we call the nuns, like they say, what religion are you? None, I'm spiritual, but not religious, right? Yeah. That is the fastest growing group of people in all the data that we're getting, is the spiritual, but not religious community people. But those people are looking for something. They want connection.
Yeah, and what I want to interject into that is what you said earlier about, religion and the rules and everything else. Why would a God do this? And then you only saw him as a he, whereas you'd never saw and you're a guy who's, done your work and your studies in this field. And to have that dogma that connects us, fear of God. Why would you fear God? Like for me, it's just, and when we start getting fear, when we get out of this way of thinking is when it allows our consciousness to expand and to open, and our awareness, right, to let more in.
Don't forget as well that pretty much every single organized religion in the world, if you go back historically and archaeologically, you will find that they used spirit plant medicines and psychedelics as a portal to spirituality and to their own God. So there's so many religions, Christians that I come across that are so, no, because of Christianity. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Your whole religion is rooted in spirit plant medicines. You just don't know it.
Yeah. Like Brian Marescu's book, The Immortality Key, came out a couple of years ago. Blew my mind, right? And Dana, you said it early on in your your comments. You said all the early medicine people were all women, right? So the earliest, for what we now know from archaeological evidence, from as I'm looking at his book, is they're scraping the early sacramental chalices that were used in the first 100 years after the death of Christ. And what they're finding in that wine, as they scrape it and do DNA analysis, they're finding psychoactive substances, ergot, which is the root of LSD. Yeah. This was an entheogen wine mixed with psychedelics that was served only by women in underground churches before Constantine made Christianity the rule or the religion of the empire. This was an underground religion led by women, and they would serve these Eucharists in underground. It was an illegal religion. It was underground. It was served by women in this psychedelic entheogen, chalice. And I think we're going to start seeing really interesting scholarship come out that really helps us reset the importance of women and the importance of plant medicine in early Christian history. And so I challenge readers to go look at that book and look at the research being done by it. It's really fascinating. I think it's going to lead to a massive shift in many of those folks.
And that being said, we look at the atrocities against peoples in the name of God, in the name of religion, whether it be the Crusades, what they did to the indigenous people coming over as they, mass genocide in North America, all of those kinds of things in the name of spirit or God. Even when you talk about the women and, witches, the witch hunt, all of that kind of stuff that happened, people are going to wake up to the truth as more and more of this information comes out and experience comes out. And who knows, maybe little gray men from outer space going to come down and tell us a few things too, which will totally shock any Christianity or religion. But, that being said, there are ways, and we need to look at what works, right? Is it working? Is there making a difference? And this is what I love. And maybe we can circle back in another conversation in the future, because I'd love to talk to some, have you guys back on again and talk to some people who've been through your program, because I want to hear from them. I believe the biggest thing that's going to move the pendulum the fastest is social proof. I talked to the guys at Therasil yesterday and the challenges that they're facing and the great work they're doing for legalization and end of use and things of that nature. Yet it's that social proof that's going to make a difference. Somebody's looking at, near death or MAIDs or whatever that is, and all of a sudden they're living longer, they have a connection, they don't want to die. There's a lot that's happening from this. And that's the social evidence, the social proof that I think is going to drive this further and further. Yes, the research has to, kind of support it in a certain way. But I also think that it's the social evidence and the social proof that is going to shift this movement faster and wider than anything else. And that's why we need to hear from the people who are having these transformations, whose lives are changing. That I've been depressed and on meds for 30 years. Nothing's worked. Nothing's worked. But holy smokes, I did this. I'm me. I'm me again. I haven't seen this person since I was 11 years old, or whatever that might be. I want to talk to those people. And if you're watching this out there and you've had that experience, please reach out to me, reach out to Peg, reach out to Dana, because we want to hear from you, because your stories and your experience and your transformation is one of the reasons why we do this work, because we've had those for ourselves. And we want as many people as possible to feel the way we feel about life and what life is, right? And that's
talking about like social proof and testimonials for this, Marc. I'm just going to kind of nudge Peg here to tell the story of a CEO who came through gathering groups that has now created an entire wellness fund for his company for any of his employees that want to go through it. So maybe Peg, you can fill in the details there.
Yeah. I mean, this is really quite amazing. So, he's a CEO of a large company in BC, and he heard about this. He's a friend of mine. He said, "Oh, I'll try it out." And we did a men's group, and he went through it. It was such a profound transformation for him. He just said, "I want to make this accessible for my executive team." And so he kind of sat down and said, "Listen, you might think I'm crazy, but this is really important. This isn't just about, some HR initiative. This is about transforming you from the inside. You will be a different person working here when you feel aligned, when you feel this is who you really are," right? So he put this out, which was really quite radical. And so he ran an entire, we did a whole group with some of the executive team, the head of HR, some of the marketing, and they did a 12-week group, and it was so transformative for them that he said it's changed the dynamic of how we interact with one another. Now we're interacting in this, we've learned to hold space for one another. We've learned to sit in these kind of spaces without just, yes, we're a company, we're trying to make money, we're doing that, but we're doing it in a way that values the people on our team first, not the bottom line. And it's changed the culture of how they're running their company. And I just said, dude, you're doing something completely innovative. You need to be telling other companies about this. So I think, Dana, you're right. Dana's been pushing me to say, Peg, there are companies that really want to be innovative. And it's not just about, hey, do this, now you'll make more money. That's not the motivation. It's do this and you'll take care of your people. And when you take care of your people, they will find a kind of a sense of joy in what they do and who they are when they feel valued and that they belong. And so I think there's huge potential to be able to use this kind of group work in companies. We've heard people, they go off to, Mexico for a retreat or Costa Rica, but we want to offer these kind of models here in Canada. Using this online platform and then doing retreats here in Canada under the safety of nurses and therapists, psychologists, physicians. We ran a group just for physicians, and I just finished it up yesterday. This is a group of really high caliber physicians that want to learn about this model and believe in the power of group transformation, because they know what it'll do is it'll impact all of the health outcomes. You think you can, he said, they say to me, I said, oh, why are you doing this? And they go, when someone has type 2 diabetes, we can say, here's this medication, here's this, but it doesn't really change them. If we begin to reorient them back so they can love themselves again, they can want to go out into nature. They want to maybe, now they're starting to walk again for the first time. They're starting to walk outside. Now they're starting to ring up their friend. Now they're making amends with their daughter that they've been estranged with for 40 years. And you have no idea the impact of when you heal in relationship from estrangement, what happens in our bodies, right? We think that has nothing to do with anything. It has everything to do with our disease, right? And so you think all these things like cancer, diabetes, heart condition, all of it's connected to this new way that we can begin to challenge not just mental health issues, but so many diseases have their foundational root in a disordered understanding of, in our relationship with ourselves. And that's the premise of The Myth of Normal, right? That book that was just put out by our Vancouver friend, his name slips my mind.
I know the book. I can't remember the name of the author as well. Yeah. But yeah, The Myth of Normal. I like that.
Yeah, and so there's this, there's this sense that disease and our health is all connected, right? It's not like they're different. This is our physical body and our mental health is all connected. This is Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate's vision is that when you change your relationship with your body, yourself, everything begins to change, right? And I just did a film called Dosed, The Trip of a Lifetime. It was about a friend of mine who had dying of cancer, Lori Brooks, and it's her story of using plant medicine, psilocybin, having a big high dose psilocybin journey to deal with her end of life anxiety. And then what happens in that story is that over the next 2 years, her relationship with herself, her family, her children, her marriage, everything begins to change from this one experience. And we document that. I brought 2 filmmakers on. I'm executive producer of it, and they did such a great job. It's now online. It just got released yesterday online. It's been in film festivals. So if you want to check it out, Dosed, Trip of a Lifetime, you can watch it for free. Donate any amount or zero if you want. We just want it watched. So if you want to see an up-close transformation of a family, an everyday mom of 4 kids she doesn't drink alcohol really, she doesn't smoke, never done weed, never done anything. This is her first experience of psilocybin, and watch the radical transformation that happens in her life. That's what good looks like. So I hope people can check that out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Lori also given a certain amount of time to live because of her diagnosis?
Yep, 6 months.
Right. And then now it's
4 years
later.
4 years.
And what's that? Mushrooms and cannabis oil. Not that I want to blow the plot, but it's a great film. And there's the other Dosed movie too, let's not forget, where they followed the woman around with addiction issues and how these medicines are great for addiction. And addiction comes again from lack of connection, no community, no support, being judged, being pigeonholed, right? And when you have this community, it all comes back to community.
Yeah, it does.
It really does. And these are tools that can help catapult, the change and the difference, where people start taking care of their body differently. Like when you talked about type 2 diabetes, how many things do we know out there that get prescribed, but doesn't really work? It manages, like being depressed. I can speak about this honestly because my mom's been depressed all her life. She did everything. She was on antidepressants, from shock therapy. She was dedicated because she was also a social worker, right? So she wasn't a smart woman, but it's something that plagued her all her life. And part of it was, acceptance for sure. But I'll tell you, as soon as she had purpose, as soon as it was about going to help someone, family member needed help or a friend or whatever, purpose, boom, she wasn't depressed anymore. She would go out and do what she had to do, right? So it's about having that community in that way and to treat what's really going on with people versus just the symptoms. And I want to add one last thing about that, because we did an interview years ago on Conscious Living Radio, and I can't remember the name of the film, but it was something about Out of the Closet. And it was about mental health, and what their premise was, and this relates back to that rite of passage we talked about earlier, is so much mental illness they were looking at as being spiritual awakenings that were happening, that nobody knew how to manage it. So you go to the doctors and they just dope you up and dumb you down, right? There was nobody to take them through this rite of passage, no shaman or, teacher that can actually explain what's going on and to get them in balance with their mind, body, and spirit. But as soon as you just keep dumping pharmaceuticals on people, I always refer to it as dummying people down, because then they're in a place that they can be managed in a different way. And I'm not saying that all pharmaceuticals are bad or anything. Everything has its place. I agree. But, is it really curing the disease, or is it just masking it? Right. And what we want is full on true healing, so people can live joyfully, excitedly, passionately about life and love all people. We don't have to agree, but I love you anyways. Right.
I love it. Thanks, Mark. That's a beautiful way to kind of frame it, that these medicines are tools for connection, healing, resilience, and growth. And when they're done in a right container, and when they're done in these kind of communal ways, they can have profound impact on our lives, on our families, and how we show up in the world, and how we can experience joy. And I know, Dana, you've been leading a group, and just seeing the transformation without even the medicine yet, right? Just the prep sessions. I'm sure, what's the experience for you like as a facilitator?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I've also had obviously the experience of going through a gathering group myself, and just noticing the difference when we all come in and we don't know each other and we're all in our individual silos, and the healing that goes on by like week 3, week 4, where we are bearing our souls and being witnessed and being seen and heard and appreciated as whole human beings. We are already being healed. And it just speaks to what we've been talking about, is the psychedelics are simply one tool that we bring into this community model, but there's so much more to it than the spirit plant medicine itself.
I love it.
Agreed. I love it myself. So as we wrap it up, Peg, Dana, tell people what's next, how to get in touch with gathering groups, the work that you do, because I think for anybody who is looking at this, you guys have probably got one of the most extensive models of the people that I've seen in terms of using this medicine in a way that is also supported by, some medical insurance and things of that nature. Because to me, the most important thing, and this is the thing I see with, coaching and all those things, and people might haze me for what I'm about to say, but I don't believe money should ever be a barrier to anybody's growth and transformation, and to live a happy, joy-filled life. Mm-hmm. There's too many. The masses don't make a ton of money. They live in poverty, yet they need this just as much as the guy who can afford $1,200 a session or $2,500 a session or whatever that is. How do we balance the profidelics and the work so that we can reach everybody who actually wants it? And I think you guys are doing a great job. So tell people how they can learn more and find out how to get in touch with you guys.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, you can go to gatheringgroups.ca, and you can just kind of sign up and say, hey, I'd love to do, what we do with everyone who signs up is we do an interview call and let everyone ask as many questions as they want. It's really important that people feel comfortable, that they feel safe, that they have all their questions answered. We're asking them to do something really big and profound. We want them to be able to feel like they're in a safe container. And so go to Gathering Groups. You can find out lots on our website, and then you can sign up. And we're launching a whole bunch of groups in the fall, in September. We're wrapping up some now. We're taking a break in August, and then we start again in the fall. But I think our big one we're really excited about is we have an event coming up July 26th. And it's an online event, and we are bringing some of the top world experts on group work and psychedelics together to have a conversation. Now, from my knowledge, this hasn't been done anywhere else. Group work and psychedelics is quite new as far as being talked about and studied. So we're looking at Dr. Rosalind Watts, who's out of the UK. She's working with synthesis before. She was working with Robin Cartwright-Harris on brain imaging with psilocybin. And now she's really launched this program called ACER, which is an integration program. But she's really seen the power of group work and psychedelics. So she's going to be on there talking about that. Dr. Shannon Dames, who's from Vancouver Island University, who's one of the founders of Roots to Thrive, which is a ketamine-based program, but they're also now going into psilocybin for end of life. Anxiety, end of life patients that are designated for that. So Shannon really, she's a nurse instructor, and was really looking at resilience around nursing. And so she's working with a lot of nurses that have gone off on stress leave, bringing them into the model and building resilience through this access to plant medicine. So she's going to be on that. Pam Crisco, Dr. Pam Crisco, who's going to be helping co-host this with me. Francine Douglas, who is from the Stolo First Nation. She's with an organization called Sacred Circle, and they are an indigenous organization using psilocybin in group models on reserve, really working with residential school survivors. And this has been a huge pain in our country. And so for them to really move into that and to develop group work models that help people feel connected and healed from their own band using psilocybin. So she's going to be talking and exploring that with us. And then we have Claire Weiss, a therapist who's really has done a lot of work on moving from just individual models into group models, and she has a real heart for the therapist community. And the therapist community is one of the first responders to this. They're the ones who are really doing this work underground, and often they feel alone, isolated, because it's, quote, illegal. They don't know where to go for resources. They don't know where do they go when they have a bad trip with someone, right? Because it's, quote, underground. So she has a real heart to create a network of connection and community. So we're going to be talking about all these kinds of issues. And to me, this is really important that we bring these people together in the same space, talking about the power of group work and psychedelics and why that's so essential. Dana, anything to add about that? That's July 26th
definitely.
online.
Definitely got some things to add to that. Good. First of all, not only is this kind of a world first conversation with these world leading experts, it's 100% a fundraiser. 100% of the proceeds are going to go back to Roots to Thrive and to Sacred Circle and to the Canadian Psychedelic Association, whatever it's called now, PAC. Psychedelic Association of Canada. Yes. So, it's come to this not only to learn, but come to this because you will also be an instrument for helping to bring this to light and bring this accessibility and education to the world. I'd also like to add to what Peg was saying, go to our website, gatheringgroup.ca, and just apply, because application is no obligation. You're not paying anything. You're not, roped into anything. What it does is it gets the ball rolling so that you can have a one-on-one conversation and you can have all your questions answered. And you can speak to one of us about if this is the right fit for you as well. We've also launched now once a month. Peg, you'll have to remind me which date it is of each month. We're running online information sessions. So you can come along to one of those and in community, in a group, ask your questions and find out everything you might like to know about the program as well. Peg, do you remember what it is? Like the third Thursday?
Yeah, it's actually, it's on Monday. We do it the third Monday of every month. It's a Zoom link. You can go to gatheringgroups.ca and you can say, hey, I want to go to a free info session. So you're live on a Zoom call, and we kind of explaining the model. We answer people's questions there. No obligation. You can just kind of sit with your mic off if you want and just kind of, but if you want to learn more, we really want this to be accessible for people. And we have scholarships available for people that don't have access to the funds. We have all sorts of funding available for people that don't often get, so BIPOC folk that don't often have access to these kinds of things. We really want to attract. This can't just be, we're three white people here on this call, right? This cannot just be the privileged people accessing this medicine.
And I'm glad you said that, Peg, because I want to add to that and put an invitation out to all peoples.
Yeah.
All peoples.
Yeah.
If you have a message you want to share, please reach out to myself or Peg, Dana, because I'll it's part of my story when I started getting into this work. People say, it's what's with all these old white guys? Not enough women, not enough, and indigenous representation. And I just stepped into the role. I'm learning, and it just became one of those things that became very, very, very important to bring in, the psychedelic feminism, right? Mm-hmm. And to bring in indigenous voices and to bring in that history instead of it just being a bunch of, old white guys. And I'm not saying you're old, Peg, but I know
look
I'm
at my hair,
up
man.
there.
This is pretty old.
But it's true. And the reason why I put out that as an invitation as well is because somebody had asked that one time. And this is after we've done a lot of work in spirit plant medicine to really make sure we have a balanced group of people who are presenting in things. And it was based on one of these interviews. Somebody said, why is it always the old white guys? And unfortunately, they were the ones who were responding to our invitation. Right. So I'm just saying is, please, if you want your voice to be heard, reach out, because we want to make and create a forum and an opportunity where people can be seen and where people can be heard. All people as a one.
Email me directly. I have my, it's peg@gatheringgroups.ca. I answer all my emails, and it's really important that people have direct access. So yeah, if you have a question, email me directly and I will get back to you and we'll jump on a call. So Marc, thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been a really fun conversation. It's been really lively.
It's my pleasure. And I look forward to them. This is just being one of many, because I want to follow up and, do something somewhat regular so we can keep inviting people so that people know there's options out there. Mm-hmm. And as your program further develops and more things start happening, we want to be a forum and an opportunity to share what's happening in the world with people. Whether it be locally, globally, whatever it may be, because, happiness and joy, transformation, growth is part of our birthright, as far as I'm concerned, for all of us. And we can't let money get in the way, or egos get in the way, or a whole bunch of BS, meaning what you might think it is, and also belief systems get in our way, right? And we need to be open, and sharing is caring. I learned the power of the sharing circles many years ago. And the more people have an opportunity to be seen and be heard, the world will be a better place.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us on, Marc, and for your collaborative spirit. And I think I'll just add one more place where people can find us is going to be at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, November 3rd to 5th, 2023. Be here with us. Find us there. We'll have a big
come meet us. I'd love to meet you and talk. If you're hearing this and you want to know about group work and psychedelics, Dan and I will be there, and we're looking forward to it.
Well, it's going to be an incredible weekend for sure. Francine Douglas spoke last year, Paul Stamets this year, Dr. Pam Kriskow, who you said is going to be at your event. She'll be there as well for the weekend, as well as many other great, leaders and teachers and influencers in as Dana said at the beginning, the industry, because we hate to say that, but in this, what I would say, this field of work, and we just love everybody to be there. We're doing our best to keep our prices as low as possible, because again, it's, prices are going up, but people's income isn't. And we want to make sure that we can pull this off so that it's sustainable, it's educational, and most importantly, experiential. Because I believe experience is the best teacher. We can read all the books. We can have all the knowledge and wisdom in the world, or knowledge. I'm not going to say wisdom. I correct that. But it's when we have the experience that supports the knowledge and the information and things that we take in, that's when I believe true growth and transformation happens. So come and have an experience with the gathering groups and at Spirit Plant Medicine. Until next time, my name is Marc Caron. I'd like to thank my guests, Anna Harvey and Peg Peters, for sharing their work and their passion for changing lives. And until we meet again, keep doing the great work, guys.